Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I don't want to talk about a specific book that I read, but rather I want to do the usual wrap-up and TBR since we are at the end of July and roaring into August. This year is going by so quickly, but that's only if you subscribe to the principle of time and whatnot. Otherwise, everything is moving slowly or whatnot, geologically speaking. What did I read in July? Everything was mostly was solid, much better than June and May had been in the past. I read some pretty interesting books that kind of some of which like span both June and July, but I'm counting them for July. I also traveled quite a bit, not very far. I went to Seattle and also Portland, and I had to which meant I had to read books on planes because it's kind of boring otherwise. And also I had a layover in Seattle. Because I missed my flight to Portland from Sacramento, and I was a couple minutes late, but there was a lot of traffic and whatnot, so I had to get a new flight, and that took me into Seattle, and then from there I had to wait like 6 hours to go back to Portland. Or to get to Portland, and so I had to read quite a bit at the airport, and I found a pretty solid books to help me get through that. Also, what's interesting is I went to Powell Books in Portland when I was there, and I managed to find quite a few interesting reads. It's unfortunate that I don't live closer to Portland because I would love to go back. That bookstore is very fascinating, and their collection, their selection of books is very interesting. I probably didn't encounter everything that I could see, but I'd love to go back if I had that opportunity. And then also talking about movies, I watched Ghost in the Shell for July, which I talked about with Lucas. Go watch our collective video that I made a few weeks ago on that. Really enjoyed Ghost in the Shell. And for the month of August, I'll be talking about The Naked City, which is a noir detective story that I've heard some good things about. So be on the lookout for that. But without further ado, let's get to the wrap-up and TBR. I'll do the wrap-up first, followed by the TBR, and we will move on from there. So what did I read for July? Well, in terms of books, I read The Last Temptation of Christ, which I started in June and I finished it in July. Very lengthy, interesting book. I thought it was powerful, very interesting to read, a lot of good writing. Definitely stood out from some of the other strange and not very good books that I read in June and May, but I was just really struck by how Nikos Kazantzakis took the story of Jesus and made him a believable character, really lively, and with all the human flaws that the human Jesus who believed himself to be the Son of Christ might actually have. I can see why it was controversial, but I think the people who are like, we should ban this book are, as per usual, giant idiots. So I definitely recommend that you go seek that out. It might be the best of the month in terms of books that I found out there. I also read Archie Meets Kiss, which seems so diametrically opposed to The Last Temptation of Christ. It was a crossover with Archie comics and Kiss the band, and I thought it was bad. It was just not very good writing, and the rules of this crossover never really made any sense to me, so that's one of the many reasons it just doesn't hold up. I also read The Quarantine Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot, which was awful. There's something redeeming about the previous entries of the Princess Diaries series. Some element of humor or something like that, but you just can't find that here. It feels like Meg Cabot is spinning her wheels trying to find something to talk about, and she never manages to do anything. So she ends up writing about the pandemic, but never saying anything of substance. And I have a feeling that's something that more authors, as time goes on, are going to need to do when talking about the pandemic. I feel like everything that can be said has been said about COVID-19. So you have to really dig down deep and make it meaningful. Otherwise, what sets you apart from the thousands of other authors who are talking about it in this day and age, and the journalists and whatnot? It just feels like another story in the ether. And this one is especially one of the more the worst. The bottom of the barrel there. I also read Leg, The Story of a Limb and the Boy Who Grew From It by Greg Marshall. This was a book club read from my friend Bevan. I thought it was very good, one of the better ones in recent memory. I really liked Greg Marshall's exploration of sexuality, disability, and family. And in particular, some parts of his story, his memoir, hit close to home, especially his relationship with his younger sister and the trouble that stemmed from all that. I thought, even though Greg and I are from two different worlds, that still felt pretty relatable. So I definitely recommend that to you out there. I also read Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Galchen, which I thought was pretty good. Definitely recommend that one to you out there. As I mentioned earlier, I had to do a lot of reading in airports, and Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch is one of those books that I read, and it made the time flow by really smoothly, so I can say that it's a good airplane read, but just a good read in general. I like how Galchen used historical figures to tell a story in a fictional sense. And it reminded me a little bit of John Williams' Augustus, which was also good, but I do think that I liked this one more because the characters felt more lively in that way. So yeah, I definitely recommend that you check out that one as well. I also read The Red Car, which was a random selection from my library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. My views, my opinion on it is very mixed. On one hand, I think it's a very interesting sort of feminist tale of what women have to endure and how it can just sort of make them tired. But on the other hand, the writing seems really bad, and no matter how much I try to convince myself, there is that lingering doubt in the back of my mind that this author is telling a pretty bad story and doing so in a poor way. But I still don't think I'm fully committed to that, and so I think it might just be I didn't like it, but other people might, and I didn't really have a reason to talk about it on this channel. So that was another book that I read on the airplane. It was mixed. Like, I was enjoying it somewhat, but also the writing kept making me stumble, and I just didn't care for it by the end. I just wanted to get through the end of the book. I also read The Age of Reptiles. It was an omnibus and volume 1 of Richard Delgado's work with The Age of Reptiles. Very fascinating comic book told using dinosaurs. It was a story about dinosaurs with no dialogue. It was just the actions of the creatures in the story. Which was a lot of fun, although I will say that it was hard to get through at times because there's no dialogue, so you have to try to understand what's going on in each panel, and that can make it hard, and you stumble at times because of it. But it's still something that's worth pursuing out there. It's definitely one of the more interesting comic books that I've read. And then related to that, I also read The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen by Alan Moore, volume 1 of that, with art by a number of other people. I thought it was okay. I personally did not care for it. It doesn't hold up as well as Alan Moore's other comics, including Watchmen, V for Vendetta, etc., etc. All of them pretty solid entries. And this one, I don't quite understand why people have praised it before. It just seems like an average pulpy kind of comic, more of a pastiche than anything else, and never really justifying what it's trying to say. In fact, part 1 of it is just gathering the characters together, and nothing really notable happens in that. And I, for that matter, I don't understand why they turned this into a movie. Maybe it was Alan Moore's name recognition that got people in there. But this was before Watchmen and V for Vendetta. So I can understand why the movie bombed so hard. And the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that movie, like its bombing is one of the reasons that Sean Connery just stopped acting. Like he was like, okay, I guess I don't know what's a good role anymore. So yeah, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is not one of my favorite Alan Moore comics. So probably one of the more skippable ones. I also read a number of short stories in July, including Brokeback Mountain by Annie Proulx, which is probably the best of the month for short stories. Really good story exploring, conservative areas and gay relationships. I think the movie stands out because it follows the ideas explored in the short story so well. So it's definitely a recommend from me. Also from A to Z by Susan Glaspell. Certainly a lot of fun. Not as interesting as A Jury of Her Peers, but it's another real hit for Susan Glaspell, making her an enjoyable author to read. Also Ulysses. I thought it was a forgettable story about unfortunate events in a small town. Not really a fan. I find myself, kind of forgetting about the events as time progresses, but maybe it might be interesting to you all out there. I read it from a short story collection. I also read The Mouse by Anaïs Nin, which I thought was a fun sort of feminist story about the anxiety and the pressure placed on young women and how that can lead to, some disastrous consequences. I look forward to reading more from Anaïs Nin there. And then I read a number of poems throughout the month of July. They were LGBT themed, from gay, lesbian, transgender poets. Definitely another interesting period from the end of May to the end of July, where I just focused on those LGBT poets. Definitely found a number of interesting poets that I want to explore more, including C.P. Cavafy for his poem "The City," where he talks about how you're never going to escape the city; it's going to eat you alive, and you're going to hate yourself. Definitely a very fascinating poem, and if you're looking for any LGBT poets to follow and become more acquainted with, definitely check out my Poetry Thursday videos for more information about that. But what do I plan on reading in August? For my TBR, I have a number of books and short stories and poems planned. For books, I again want to get to Evicted by Matthew Desmond. I keep roaring past it for one reason or another, but I will get to it in August. I hope I get to it. The Sleeper Awakes, which I had planned for last month, but because I was traveling, I didn't get to read as much. And that's by H.G. Wells. Berserk Volume 4 and 5, which I bought but still need to read. A number of the bookstore books that I got from Powell's, which I need to stop buying books because I haven't finished the ones that I've been that I got so far. So I find myself becoming that stereotype of the reader who just buys books and never gets to all of them. But hopefully I'll be able to get through most of them this month. And then any books that I get from the library, don't forget to patronize your local library. They might have interesting and unusual stories that are worth checking out. And then also All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. That's a story from an Indian author. That's also a book club read. If you're interested in joining along and reading with Bevan and me and anyone else who might be a part of book club, click the link in the description to join the Discord and inquire more about that. We would be happy to talk more with you about books and such. And then I also maybe want to get to some Flannery O'Connor. The Violent Bear It Away has been on my TBR for the year of 2023, so hopefully I can get to it by the end of this year. I also have a number of short stories planned, including A Wireless Message by Ambrose Bierce, which I already made a video about, and it'll probably be out the day after this video or something or the day after that you see this video, or sometime around when this video comes out. And then also another short story by Rachel Khong, who is an author who I haven't explored before, so I'm looking forward to reading her work. And then also a number of poems, which might not be LGBT themed, but we will no doubt encounter more of those types of authors in the future. And so yeah, we're just trying to find some high quality poetry as we or as I go about my travels. Anyway, that was my wrap up and my TBR for July and August. If you have any recommendations for me, or you want to comment on something I'm reading here, do so below. I will try to get to any book that you recommend, especially if you think it might be weird or just something that might interest me based on what you know of my book interest, if you've been following this channel for a while, or even if you just based it on what you heard in this video. Other than that, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this channel, or so that they can join the Discord if they want. The link is in the description. We'd be happy to see you and talk about books or movies or whatever else you want to talk about. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and August travels. Farewell.